Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Kathy was born and raised in a rural family. Her mother worked on the farm all her life. Her father worked as a driver. Kathy and her sister Christina rustled around the house from a small age, cleaning, cooking, tending to the livestock. Parents didn't have time. They earned money. They came home tired in the evening and their daughters looked after them. They would set the table, pour tea, and carry clean towels after washing. It was the order of the day then. Kathy dreamed of being a teacher from childhood. Perhaps her first teacher played a big part in that. It was a beautiful, very intelligent young girl, barely graduated from the institute. She spoke competently and calmly, knew the answers to all questions, and skillfully motivated the class to successful study. She had no laggards. Even the weakest tried and stretched to please Mrs. Anna. Kathy remembered crying when her favorite teacher's practice was over and she went home. She hadn't been the only one upset. Since then, the girl had firmly decided that when she grew up, she would become a teacher, as good and kind as Ms. Anna. So Kathy never changed her mind. She studied well and, having finished school, easily entered the university. Life in the city began to get strange. That metals, a room in the dormitory. It was so unusual. The girl had never been separated from her parents and sister Christina for longer than a couple of days. And here it was all of a sudden. It was scary and hard at first, but Kathy quickly got used to it. She liked her studies, her classmates, her teachers. The girl realized more and more clearly. She had chosen the right path. Being a teacher is really her calling. After receiving her diploma, Kathy got the first job in her life. She was taken in the local city school, also in the prestigious language gymnasium. And the salary offered such a young girl could not dream of. Kathy plunged headlong into her work. She liked everything and to teach, and answer the numerous questions of her kids, and write notes for lessons, and deal with interesting and difficult cases for the pedagogical council. A young specialist was noticed and appreciated. It was nice to receive compliments from experienced colleagues. Kathy felt really happy. Christina, her sister, had also moved to the city by then. Graduated from the College of Economics. She got a job at a meat packing plant in the administrative office. Even got married, and very happily. James, the son of the director of the plant, fell in love with the pretty young employee. He was from a wealthy family, handsome, educated, witty. Perhaps his parents were at first against the bride's misbehavior from the village. But after recognizing her, they grew to love and accept her. Of course they did. Beautiful, hardworking, faithful, kind. The young lived in their own apartment, which had 3 spacious rooms and a huge loggia. This miracle was given to them at the wedding by James's parents. Kathy was sincerely happy for her sister, but her personal life was not going well. Back in her university days, Kathy had several failed romances. They all followed the same pattern. First, the girl became enchanted with the next suitor. She began to see him as an ideal man. Prepares in her mind for marriage. Then came the epiphany. Wearing heartache and almost disgust to the one who recently was the meaning of life, Kathy. For some reason, her beau turned out to be infantile and spoiled creatures and egoists, not independent, weak. No, with such Kathy could not connect her life. Bitterness, disappointment after each breakup remained for a long time. That's why Kathy decided to take a break. Well, these men, they're just frustrating. It's better to get down to work on her career. And then, one day in the life of a young teacher appeared he, Andrew, a modest, even a little stiff and short guy with blue eyes and a nice smile. For the first time, they sought each other in the school gym. On the eve of September 1, Andrew was leading a team of craftsmen who were hurriedly finishing the school renovation. The young men met their eyes. Kathy immediately realized that this man hooked her something. She couldn't quite put her finger on it. He was not so handsome, quiet, and unremarkable. And he flared to the roots of his hair at the sight of Kathy and turned away, embarrassed. It looked very sweet and touching. Kathy realized that he liked him too, at first sight. Then Kathy met Andrew every day, and he invariably hid his eyes from her. But the girl began to notice that the guy secretly looks at her when he thinks that she does not see it. And it was very pleasant and exciting. And one day, Andrew suddenly gathered courage. It was already on the eve of the handover. One last chance to get to know each other. Job done. Andrew has nothing more to do at the school, so he'd never see Kathy again. So the boy decided to take a desperate and difficult step. Andrew spoke quietly and just no florid phrases, but his speech was so sincere, so touching. Kathy, of course, melted and agreed to go out with the guy. Andrew did not even realize that she had been waiting for this invitation for a long time and was beginning to worry that she would never get it. And what to do then? She wasn't going to hang herself around his neck. Andrew invited Kathy to the movies. The girl was not worried before the first date. She could see that she really liked Andrew. She felt warmth coming from him and therefore was sure that their meeting would go as it should. If only Andrew would relax a little. He's very shy. After that first date, Kathy realized that Andrew was completely her person. They were so good, so easy together. Both told each other about their lives and destinies. Andrew was raised by his grandmother. His parents died when the boy was only 6 years old. So there he was left with his paternal grandmother, who was already a very old woman. She was an old-school lady and believed that children should be brought up in strictness, especially boys. So Andrew's childhood could not be called happy, warm, and carefree. No, the boy didn't complain. He just told me how he grew up and grew up. This is Kathy, sensitive and attentive Kathy. She drew her own conclusions. She felt sorry for this wonderful boy. She wanted to hug him, kiss him, to give him some warmth and care. I mean, that's all he needed. When Andrew was a kid, he went into the army after school. Then he came back, trained as a welder. But he didn't get a job in his profession. But he became a foreman. Repair crews are also bread and butter. Still, the boy never gave up hope of becoming a welder. And the wages are better there. And he'd studied so much for a reason. Andrew lived in a rented apartment, just like Kathy, when he was just a kid. Clever relatives had sold the parents' house, the boy's orphanage. There was no end in sight. So the boy had to start from scratch. But he was not discouraged and did not complain about life, although fate treated him rather unfairly. Andrew was very kind and caring, unlike Kathy's previous beau. He always wondered if she was hungry, and on chilly evenings he threw his jacket over her shoulders to keep her warm with Andrew. The girl felt loved and desired. He seemed to be willing to do anything for her. It was a wonderful feeling. Kathy realized that she had fallen in love, and the feeling was completely mutual. There wasn't even any doubt. Andrew looked at her with such eyes and tried so hard to do everything to make her feel good around him. It was impossible not to notice. Kathy was not surprised when Andrew proposed to her. And of course, she had happily accepted right away. She had wanted to live next to Andrew for a long time. In one apartment, they would take care of each other, support each other, and it would be more fun together. Kathy was tired of returning to an empty, cold room. Christina was not at first delighted with her sister's choice. You're young, you're pretty, you could easily find someone more wealthy. How many friends does my earring have? They're all handsome and sons of wealthy parents, and they're like cheese in butter. What about this Andrew? Nikolai is not yard, not work normal. But when she recognized Andrew, the best Christina changed her mind. You have a good one. Smiled her sister, shared her impressions with Kathy. Very kind and loves you very much. You'll do well together. You'll achieve everything. You can't miss out on a man like that. I'm so happy for you. Andrew and Kathy got married. They lived in his rented apartment, and Kathy's golden years began. The young husband tried to help his wife with everything. He did a lot of things for her, and even as he had dreamed, he found a new job. He got a job as a welder at a construction site, took part-time jobs, did not refuse the opportunity to poke around, as he was going to get his own apartment. Andrew dreamed of buying a 3-room apartment in a prestigious neighborhood where there are a lot of good schools and playgrounds, so that his and Kathy's future children had a happy childhood. Andrew often made surprises to his young wife. He would give her a ring for no reason, or just come home with a bouquet. Kathy felt the happiest in the world and thanked fate for sending her such a loving and caring husband. The young couple talked for hours and discussed movies and life stories, friends, and relatives. They made plans. Sometimes they argued. Not without that, but they always came to a compromise in the end. They liked the same movies and books. They both discovered new and interesting things about each other. For example, with Andrew, Kathy got into hiking in the woods. Andrew, thanks to his young wife, loved the theater. Kathy was sure that she and Andrew were soulmates, halves of one whole. Even though the couple lived poorly, they had enough to live on. But both excesses like a luxury car or annual trips to the sea. There was no speech yet, but both were happy with what they had each other and often discussed that chance meeting at school, which might not have been. Take Kathy, a vacation in August, as her superiors had suggested to her. And then Alex was born. How did the young couple rejoice at his arrival? The new father was glowing with pride, taking his son Andrew in his arms for the first time. He turned out to be a wonderful parent, attentive, sensitive, caring. He could spend hours after work driving around with the stroller to give his young wife a break. But Kathy most often went for a walk with her husband. It was so pleasant to walk together with Andrew, holding the handle of the stroller and in a low voice, so as not to wake up his son, to talk to the man you love about everything in the world. The young parents liked to make plans for the future of their apartment. They still didn't have one. But the amount in the bank account was slowly but surely growing. Just a little bit more, and the couple will be able to afford to buy their own home from Christina's sister Kathy. At the same time, their daughter Helen was born. Young moms often went to visit each other and together learned the wisdom of caring for babies. The sisters shared advice, discussed the successes and failures of their babies. Kathy felt truly happy, and her husband is so loving and understanding. And her sister is close by. The young couple often dreamed about how their son would grow up. Surely he will be smart, kind, brave, will become, perhaps, a scientist or a master of all hands. And they and parents will try to ensure that the innate talents of their child to open and gain strength. It is only necessary to be attentive and patient. Andrew planned to study a lot with his son, to support him and always be there for him in a difficult moment. Kathy was glad that it was easy and calm at heart. The two of them and cope, raise a child a good man. But the dreams of the couple were not destined to come true. A few years after the birth of their son, misfortunes one after another fell on their small family. First came the financial crisis, as a result of which the couple's savings depreciated. They were only a few days away from buying their own apartment. The goal was so close. But after what had happened, the money accumulated in their account could only buy a couple of winter jackets. And that's if you're very lucky. Alex was already in daycare. Kathy was out of maternity leave. The couple took it hard. They even cried. I don't know what to say. Andrew couldn't help but cry. He thought his wife couldn't see, but she saw everything. The man even looked for an apartment he'd been dreaming of for a long time. Spacious, 3-room, not far from a large school and the Palace of Sports, where Alex could do swimming. And then such a blow. But there was no time to indulge in despondency for a long time. Hard times came. Salaries at Kathy's school began to be delayed for months. Things weren't going too well on the building site either. Andrew's main income now came from coven members. The man spent days working part-time jobs to feed his family. Time passed. Alex was growing up. It was time for him to go to first grade. The family seemed to adapt to the new conditions. Andrew was allowed to stay afloat. The man again made plans for his own apartment. There were hopes for a better life. A happy future loomed ahead. And then tragedy struck at the construction site. Andrew was working unofficially. The owners of the facilities saved money on everything and didn't care much about safety. Andrew knew he was taking a risk, but he was always careful and acted as carefully as possible. But this time, on the construction of a supermarket building, the man fell off from the height of the 3rd floor right onto the concrete blocks piled piles and below. Of course, Andrew did not survive. Arriving in an ambulance, doctors had only to state the man's death. Kathy was not told the terrible news until the morning. For her, the whole world turned upside down in that second. She could not even cry for a long time. The woman felt her soul and heart literally torn in half. She didn't want to live. How and why get up in the morning if there is now no nearest and dearest person? Kathy realized that she would never meet someone like Andrew again. There was no one else like him, and she didn't need anyone else. She missed his smile, his look, the smell of warmth. It was physically painful to not be able to hug a loved one. There were his things around him: clothes, books, glasses. But Andrew himself would never come home again, would never hug her and her son, would never joke with them. How to accept that? To dull the pain, Kathy even took up the bottle. Kathy realized, of course, that this was a road to nowhere. But at that moment, she didn't care, just as long as she could get rid of the unbearable pain for a moment. There's no telling what would have happened to the woman if it hadn't been for Christina. She took Alex in for a while. She saw that his mother was not able not only to look after the child, but could not even cope with herself. Kathy didn't care. She took Alex, and that was fine. And she didn't even think about her own child's feelings at that time. But he was also in pain and scared. Strange as it may seem, Alex's illness brought Kathy back to life. He caught pneumonia and went to the hospital. Christina came to her sister in tears to tell her what had happened. She felt guilty. She hadn't looked after her nephew. He had a high fever and was delirious. The doctor and I thought it was stress at first. After all, the father's dead and the mother's in a state of confusion. But then it became obvious it was more serious than that. He was in intensive care for 24 hours. He seems better now, but the doctor says it's too early to relax. And your drinking, it's a threshold to get back into life. You can't go back. Now we're gonna lose another boy. This situation brought Kathy back to life. She was more scared for her son than she'd ever been in her life. She pulled herself together, stopped drinking. She got her job back. And of course, she became a caring and loving mother again. Every day, Kathy went to visit her son in the hospital. At first, she stood under the windows, and then when Alex was allowed to go out, she walked with him for hours on the hospital yard. Alex grew up immediately. Trouble had turned a 7-year-old boy into a little old man with sad eyes. He was surprisingly thin, pale, and silent. Looking at her son, Kathy realized that he was under deep stress. Her baby is traumatized. He needs a strong mother. And she, Kathy, took risks to remove drowned in her own grief, forgetting about the native man, so much in need of her support. Kathy has been the perfect mother ever since. Attentive, totally focused on her son caring. In the city, Kathy couldn't hold on. It was too expensive to rent an apartment. The woman didn't make that much money. She had to return to the village. Father was already gone, and his life was taken away by a heart attack 2 years earlier. And my elderly mother was in great need of support and care. It was already hard for her to cope with the household on her own. So Kathy's move came very well. Alex went to the first grade of the village school. Kathy got a job there as a teacher, but soon she had to think about changing jobs. The salaries in that school were very different from the salaries. In the city gymnasium on such crumbs was simply could not live, and Kathy had to pull the child alone on his feet, to put him on his feet. And then a neighbor, Aunt Nura, offered a good auction. Her nephew had a point at the central market in the city. He sold clothes and shoes and accessories. He needed a salesman, someone decent, someone he could trust, a salary. Aunt Tyrin, the nephew, promised a good one. He also offered a percentage of the proceeds. 2 by 2, Kathy was also quite satisfactory. It was hard, of course, to part with the dream job. After all, teaching kids is Kathy's true calling. The woman knew from childhood what she wanted to be. But what can you do when times are so hard? They've got to eat something with Alex. What wouldn't you do for a child? With great regret, Kathy left school. She missed her students, her coworkers, and her school life for a long time. Her heart sank every time she saw uniformed children on the street. But Kathy was facing new realities. Working the market was hard. Capricious customers who themselves do not know what they want, scandalous traders. Competitors, heavy financial responsibility. And the road took a lot of time and effort. All the same, in the days when Kathy went to work, she had to get up neither light nor dawn and walk almost 2 kilometers to the nearest stop, through which the bus to the city. But the paycheck was good. Now Kathy could buy her son and beautiful clothes and toys. And even to the sea, they flew to the resort every summer. And her mother helped to look after her son. She was already, of course, very old. But she had enough time and energy for her grandson. Kathy often went to visit Christina. She did not work, was busy with the house and her daughter could afford. Her husband earned enough to provide for the family. Christina often felt sorry for her sister. How did your fate turn out? You work like a horse, spinning as hard as you can. I even feel awkward about being a housewife, and you. Everyone has his own fate, sighs Kathy. I'm not complaining about mine. We all have something for nothing. Kathy was genuinely happy about Christina's life. She adored both her sister and her niece Helen Christina, but her daughter. The 4 of them often went out together. They'd go out together. All in all, they lived close together. It was Christina who advised Kathy to save some money and invested in shares of a large company. James says it's the right thing to do. We have a lot of money invested in those stocks ourselves. My husband's sure it'll be great in the end. And James is smart, he knows. Kathy listened to her sister, and without saying a word to anyone. She bought a few shares. The capital grew, but it was impossible to get rich very slowly thanks to such interest, as it seemed at first. But Kathy decided to let the money lie on deposit. But she did not tell her son or her mother about the shares. I don't think they'll approve. They'll say it's all a waste of money. Let the family live in peace. So Kathy had her own little secret. Now she was saving money, buying stocks, saving for a happy future for her son. Alex grew up a smart, athletic boy, unlike his modest, quiet father. Alex was the soul of the company. He always had a lot of friends, comrades. The guy walked a lot, laughed, socialized. He was a very cheerful and carefree person. Kathy, looking at her son, was happy to see what kind of a guy grew up. Confident, brave, smart. This was exactly the kind of son she and Andrew imagined when they walked around the neighborhood with a stroller. Alex dreamed of becoming a lawyer, but to enter the cherished faculty he lacked just a little. The guy had to go to the army. Returning, he decided to try his luck in the city. His mother supported her son's decision and even helped financially. She rented Alex an apartment. Go, try, dare. Just be careful and know that no matter what happens, you can always come home to this house. Thank you, Alex smiled. But I'm not going back. I'm going to make my way in the city. There are so many opportunities there, so many prospects that something will work out. Goodbye, smiled Kathy. It was scary to let her son go, but what can you do? The boy had grown up. It was time for him to start his own life. Alex enrolled in a construction college and at the same time got a job at a factory. He studied, worked, and paid for his own apartment. He often came to the village to visit his mother and grandmother. He always showed up with gifts and funny stories. Kathy's mother had completely given up. She hardly ever left the house, and sometimes she didn't even recognize her own daughters. One day she had a heart attack. Kathy called an ambulance. Mom was taken to the hospital. The old woman never came back. What do you want age? The doctor sighed tiredly. No one is eternal. Kathy and Christina organized a funeral in the village. A lot of people gathered for the wake. After all, everyone here knew Mom. Then Christina told her sister to take over her parents' house. I don't need that half of the inheritance. I don't need it. You know I don't. What about you? You took care of your mom the last few years. That's hard work. So it's only fair that you get the house. Kathy didn't mind. She really needed her own place. Old age was fast approaching. The woman was sometimes surprised at how quickly her life flew by. It seemed that she and Andrew Alex had just been born. They were young, full of plans and hopes, beautiful. And now Alex is a grown-up, independent man. Andrew is not, and she herself is almost an old woman, that ahead only pension and quiet, peaceful existence in a village house. The only hope is in Alex. Here he will get married. His grandchildren will be born. The kids will come to visit their grandmother. Then the joy in life will appear. By the way, Alex is a good man. He did not give up his dream of law school. He got in after all. It was hard for him to work and study, but he'll get through it. Kathy, if anything, will help and support him. Christina said it was time to live for himself. You're young, you're still beautiful. Alex has grown up. Now you can treat yourself. Your salary is not bad. You even have savings. Let's fly to Italy or Greece. You've never been abroad. We'll take a walk there and have a vacation. What, Greece? What, Italy? Kathy smiled back. I have a grown-up son, Ivan, will soon get married. Probably he will need to help with the wedding and the apartment. That's what I'm saving up for. I don't have time for a vacation. Your son is a healthy, grown-up man. He's so strong and handsome. He'll manage on his own. You have to think about yourself sometimes. But Kathy didn't agree with her sister. She likes to talk easily in front of her husband like that. And Kalenka was born with a golden spoon in her mouth. She has a future for 100 years ahead planned and secured. True, the nephew was good, despite the rich parents, and grew up wise, modest, judicious. Simple, such a natural, pleasant, very independent too. Like Alex, she's been working since she was young. Golden girl. When Kathy had argued with her sister that Alex would need her support for the foreseeable future, she'd been right on the money. Shortly after that conversation, the son came to visit his mother for the weekend. He was mysterious, not as he always was. Kathy immediately realized that something was wrong. The woman quickly set the table and put out her son's favorite treats: fried potatoes with mushrooms, pancakes, and pickles from the cellar, and then watched with pleasure as Alex absorbed it all to satiety. The young man shared with his parents an amazing news: Mom, I'm getting married. As Kathy splashed her hands, when on the calm questions fell from her like from a cornucopia. The woman is filled with a mass of emotions: joy of anxiety, surprise. Her name is Julia. You're gonna love her. I'm bringing her here next weekend. You two should get to know each other before we get married. Just wanted to warn you first. Kathy nodded her head with a smile. She knew, of course, that this moment would come sooner or later, but still found herself caught off guard by the news. But wow, Alex is getting married, all grown up. Julia worked as a waitress in a cafe. The guy often came to eat at this place. That's how they met. Julia's from the country too. The son shared details. She was raised by a single mother too. See how much we have in common. Julia came to the city to go to law school. Another amazing coincidence. She dreamed of working for the police, helping to catch criminals, but she's so frail, so thin. What kind of policeman would she be? Julia didn't make it. She failed her college exams, but the girl did not want to return home to the village. What would she do there? She grew up in a small, remote village in a poor family. Her mother had 5 younger children besides her. Julia didn't want to go back to her old life, so she got a job as a waitress in a cafe. She rented a room in a dormitory and lived on her own, working slowly. How long have you two been together? 6 months almost made Alex smile. From that smile, Kathy realized that her son was head over heels in love. She's nice. Takes care of me. She cleans the house. She cooks. I mean, we've been living together for 4 months in my rented apartment. I proposed to her the other day. That's how Kathy got through. It's how much to prepare, and the dining room for the wedding to order, and outfits for the bride and groom to find and host, hire, and menu. Think through, and the invitation to send out to moms. We decided that we can do without all that. Just answered Alex. We'll sign everything quietly in the registry office and everything as you want, nodded Kathy. She had painted in her head the image of a perfect wedding for her only son a long time ago. It was a cheerful celebration with a crowd of dressed-up guests, a ringing toastmaster, a huge cake, and a table full of treats. Cars decorated with balloons and ribbons, dancing, a beautiful bride, and a happy groom. But since the young people decided differently, so be it. It's their holiday after all. The following weekend, Alex arrived at his mother's house with his bride. Kathy was confused, prepared a royal chair, and made salads and meat, spared from the appetizers, stacked on the composed. Kathy was very excited. She wanted to please her future daughter-in-law, to show Julia that she was very much expected in this house. They were preparing for the arrival of the dear guest, as long as not to say the wrong thing, so that Alex was ashamed of her mother. Then it didn't happen. Julia turned out to be a thin girl and not tall. Big dark eyes, thin eyebrows, and a spread of thick silk. She was dressed simply but tastefully. An elegant dress, low-heeled shoes. At first, the guests and the hostess felt a little constrained. Julia, looking around carefully, was silent. Apparently, she was embarrassed to say a word. Only after a while did Kathy realize that this modesty was feigned. Julia was just looking around. She was choosing tactics of behavior, drawing conclusions. The atmosphere at the table was moving. Alex joked, amused his ladies, throwing up interesting topics for conversation. He was always so lively, energetic, companionable. In the course of the conversation, it became clear that Julia was indeed from a very poor and disadvantaged family. The girl charmed Kathy at the first meeting with her modesty. Bride Alex had a very sweet smile, and how she looked at her fiancé. In her eyes shone tenderness and love. The guy, however, answered Julia in the same way. He held her hand, now and then took her by the waist. There was love and harmony between the young people. Kathy looked at them and her heart rejoiced. Alex and Julia were married. Kathy suggested the young people to have a party in a cafe. All right, not a real wedding with a toastmaster and cars, but they could have a proper celebration with their friends. She even set aside money for it. Kathy had savings. Over the years, the woman managed to put aside a certain amount, plus stocks bought on her sister's advice. They'd grown a lot. At first, Kathy dreamed of buying an apartment in the city, but then realized that in the village she lives well. Quiet, calm people, familiar and friendly around. Kathy liked the very atmosphere reigning in her village. Closer to retirement, the woman realized that she did not want to move anywhere, but she could. She had enough money for a small apartment. But never mind, her son could still use it. Only Christina's sister knew about the savings. Kathy didn't talk about her wealth, not even to her son. She wanted Alex to grow up independent, that he as a man, himself tried to earn money for housing and something to achieve in life. But it will not work out. His mother will always help him in a difficult situation. There are means only for the time being. He shouldn't know that. Let him make his own way. The money was in a bank account. Kathy had invested some of it in stocks a few years ago on the advice of her sister's husband, and the money was now generating a good income. For her son's wedding, Kathy had withdrawn from the account. The amount she had estimated would be enough for a lavish celebration. She wanted to give them a present. On her son's next visit, she handed Alex a puffy envelope. Wow, he was amazed. He poked his nose inside. What a surprise. Where'd you get it? I saved up, Kathy smiled. Make yourself a holiday like you want to go out to a restaurant with your friends. Don't deny yourself anything, have fun. Thank you, smiled Alex. But we better save this money for renting an apartment. Why do you need to rent an apartment and already earn money? And the wedding, it is in general once in a lifetime, only happens. Well, ideally, of course. I have problems with my job, Alex admitted. They pay pennies, and it's unstable there. I'm just in danger of getting sick. And Julia, that she does not earn enough. A waitress does not pay millions. It's okay. Kathy patted his grown son on the shoulder. Alex is all grown up. He's a big man himself, and his problems are just as grown up. Already financial issues sadden him. He's thinking about supporting his family. I feel sorry for him, of course. Yes, everyone goes through such things. Don't worry, son. When you finish your studies, you'll find a better job. You're my good boy. You're so smart and handsome. You'll be such an educated man. If you're such a man, they'll take you everywhere. They won't take you. Alex sighed even harder. I was expelled, as Kathy added. Why for truancy? Alex said quietly. Kathy was almost crying, son. In her dreams, she had already seen her son as a graduated lawyer, successful, competent, highly paid. And now all of a sudden it's news like this, just like that. Alex looked at his mother with irritation. I had to work a lot, so I didn't get to classes. I had a lot of absences. I thought they'd come out. They didn't, so I got expelled. No big deal. Kathy pulled herself together. Alex needs a little encouragement now. You'll learn. Not the first and not the last. Yes, I do not want to finish studying. Alex got angry. I'm a grown man. I'm sitting in the pears, pants rubbing. It's funny. You have to earn money, not suffer with nonsense. Kathy did not argue with her son. Not in that. He was now in a state of nothing. Then she will change his mind. Education is necessary for a young man. Otherwise, you can't build a career. A woman is sure to convey this to her grown-up only child. Now it is necessary to support him, to calm him down, to encourage him. Well, if you don't want a wedding, do with this gift of mine. What do you wish? Nodded Kathy Alex. Thank you. Alex's mom smiled gratefully and happily. We could really use the money right now. We're happy to help. You're all grown up and practical. Others would be happy to spend money on a holiday. But you're thinking about the future. I have to, sighed Alex. The son left, and Kathy stayed home with a heavy heart. Alex was also worried now. He didn't finish his studies. No decent job, no place to live. Now he's getting married. If children will go, Alex will have to work at unskilled work from morning till night to provide for his family. And this is not the future Kathy dreamed of for her only child. He's a grown man, he'll figure it out. Calmed her sister Christina in the evening on the phone. What are you worried about? You've done everything I asked of you. It's up to him now. Maybe give him money for an apartment. I've consulted with anyone. It's easier. The young will at least pay for the rent. Let him pay. The older sister objected. Don't even think of mentioning that money now. They'll sit on their necks and weigh their legs down. But they'll try to climb up. Maybe they'll succeed. You can always give them the apartment. It's not time yet. You are right, you, Christina, are right completely, of course, grinned my sister. And you come to visit me. Tomorrow come to the movie with you, go to a cafe. Sit. You need to unwind. Again, Christina, you're right, smiled Kathy. What a blessing that she has such a sister, a close person who will always support and cheer up. Alex and Julia got married. The signing took place in the city registry office modestly and quietly. Kathy, Christina with Rudit, and two of Julia's girlfriends attended the ceremony. Then a small group of people modestly celebrated the events in a cafe. We sat only a little. We made a few toasts to the newlyweds, gave the newlyweds presents, and dispersed. Julia had to go on shift. Alex was waiting at work, too. Kathy stretched out disappointedly when she and her sister were alone. The women decided to do a little shopping. Come on, young people don't care now. Christina waved away carelessly. As long as they lived well. Did Alex live well with Julia? Kathy had no idea. The son tried not to talk to his mother about it. It was awkward for her to ask, to pry into the soul of an adult. The young people came to visit occasionally. Julia behaved politely, but coldly and aloofly. Kathy noted that the young couple seemed to have a good relationship. Alex's job was not going well. He changed places and employers, looking for a decent income, but nothing worked out. Alex didn't want to think about going back to university. Kathy several times wanted to tell her son that she had a safety cushion, which she was ready to give him. She wanted to encourage Alex to take that desperation out of his eyes. But the woman delayed. We need to let the young ones try to get back on their feet on their own. It's important. It's not like they're so needy right now. Yes, it's hard. But they're two adults who should be able to cope. But if there's a child, then it's a different matter. Children should live in normal conditions with calm, peaceful parents. Several years passed. The situation in my son's family did not change. He was still looking for a job. Alex, from a cheerful joker of a joker, turned into a frowning man. Kathy thought it was because of money problems. But one day, she accidentally witnessed a conversation between her son and Julia. The couple came to visit Kathy Petrovna. Lately, it happened less and less often. The woman went to the kitchen to take out of the oven forbidden with apple's goose. and when she returned with a tray in her hands, she managed to witness an ugly scene. "You're just a lowlife." Julia looked at Alex with dislike. "You can't do anything." Married Andrew. He gave her a cool phone for her birthday. And they're going on vacation to the Emery soon. And you can't even find money for a spa for the woman you love. We're about to be evicted from our apartment for non-payment. Alex silently lowered his head. He had nothing to object. Probably, the young man felt at this moment really full of nothing. Kathy's heart squeezed with pity for his son. Wow, Julia often humiliates him like this. Once when she was visiting, she couldn't help herself, and the son was too used to hanging his head. He wasn't even surprised and didn't even try to defend himself. Julia's a real piece of work. He's so modest and pretend at first. And herself. Kathy had a hard time pulling herself together. You can't show your true feelings about the situation. In fact, she must pretend she hadn't seen or heard anything. Her interference will only spoil everything. Julia will then have the opportunity to call Alex a little son. But of course, she's going to give her mother-in-law a run for her money. That's for sure. No, let them deal with it themselves. They're adults. For the rest of the evening before the young ones left, Kathy stayed neutral. Talked on distracted topics, smiled at both spouses, and tried not to notice the sunken sadness in her son's eyes. When the children left, many things became obvious to Kathy. Alex is head over heels in love with Julia. That much is clear. He's willing to go to great lengths for her. He tries, he fights, but he can't get anywhere. Largely because Alex never finished his studies, and he didn't finish his studies just because of Julia. The guy has to work hard to provide for his lover's needs. Kathy got herself back. You have to be objective. It was still Alex's choice to drop out of university and get a job. Yes, a lot of it was out of a desire to please Julia. But Alex made the decisive step himself. How and how to help his son now? Kathy thought again about the money in the account. Should she give it to Alex? Let him buy an apartment. Julia would be delighted. She approves. In serious matters, Kathy is used to consulting her sister. Jana called her. "You're crazy," Christina exclaimed after hearing her sister's reasoning. "Under no circumstances do not buy an apartment now. Don't you realize that it will be considered as jointly acquired property in marriage? They've only been together a week. What if they get a divorce? Julia would take half of it without blinking an eye. I understand if they had kids. Then at least the grandkids would get everything. And now it's going to someone else. You worked hard. You didn't earn money for this spinning your tail. Oh, it's hard being the mother of a grown son." Kathy sighed. She realized her sister was right again. So many nuances to keep in your head. It's not easy being a mother at all, her sister parried. But it's nice sometimes. A few more years passed. Kathy saw that her son was unhappily married. Alex was still looking for a decent living. He did all sorts of things, and Vactang, and already worked, and tried to open a business, and worked as a trucker, but nowhere for a long time. What was going on? The company went bankrupt, or he didn't pass the medical examination. Finally, Alex gave up. Tired. It's hard to work and be disappointed. One day he came to his mother suddenly, unannounced, alone. "We are not pulling the life in the city," he sighed. "It's expensive for us. We'll come back for the first time with you. We'll live. You don't mind?" "No." Shook her head in surprise. "That's good," nodded Alex. "In that case, we'll come next week." Kathy was at a loss after her son's departure. Are they going to live together here in the village? What kind of a strange decision. There are no jobs here. What Alex and Julia are counting on. But the woman did not argue with her son. She saw that he's already having a hard time. All right, let them try. They are probably just looking for a way out of a difficult situation. They're also considering a life in the countryside. Well, we can do that, since the city didn't work out. Life together with Alex and Julia began with the division of territory. "Mom, we will live in the living room," said Alex. "Why?" Kathy was surprised. She had prepared for the young corner of her bedroom. In her opinion, it was the most cozy room and remote. The young people would live more quietly there. Living room, Kathy liked to rest here watching TV, and the neighbors often dropped by. There was plenty of room in the living room for friends. Because it was the biggest and brightest room, Alex answered simply. Then Kathy realized that her son was broadcasting Julia's will. He always tried to please his wife in everything. He loved his young wife more than his father's life and took advantage of it. Julia immediately showed her true face to her mother-in-law. Did not even try to pretend anymore, polite or modest. She didn't like everything Kathy did. And her mother-in-law didn't cook right. Too fatty, unhealthy. And the server's table was sluggish, wrong. And she didn't even know how to mop the floors. Julia would often admonish Kathy with a look of contempt. That it's you who rattles the dishes in the morning and disturbs your sleep, or are your friends laughing too loud? Couldn't you get together somewhere else in the evening? At first, Kathy was at a loss for words at her sister-in-law's insolence. Then, of course, she thought of appropriate responses to Julia's barbs. She wanted so much to remind her that she was not in her own house. Accordingly, she should behave more modestly. But Kathy lingered. For her son's sake, of course. The woman saw. Alex is very attached to Julia. He loves her, idolizes her. The young husband tried to fulfill his wife's every whim. There were many whims. The man failed and felt guilty. Julia was suspicious of elegy, this feeling of guilt. Often she mentioned husbands, boyfriends, her acquaintances who overpowered the women they loved with jewelry and literally overwhelmed them with money. Kathy understood the purpose of what was being said. Julia was manipulating Alex, played on his feelings, used her spouse to suppress him. But she wasn't even trying to open up to her son. He's not in the right state of mind right now anyway, too blinded by love and passion. Kathy sincerely did not understand what her son found in this Julia. Well, yes, she was pretty, but there's a lot of them out there. And now you're getting these feelings. It seemed that if Julia asked him to jump off a cliff, he would do it gladly. Alex got a job at the local sawmill. The work was hard, physically exhausting, but the pay was good. Enough to take Julia into town from time to time. Then to shopping, then to a restaurant. The young wife herself didn't bother to work. Well, where can I find a suitable place here in the village? She sighed. And in the city, every day do not go to the city. I traveled, Kathy suddenly remembered. I had no husband, no child to raise. So I drove from here to the central market every day. Why are you comparing times and situations? Julia sighed languidly. First of all, I am married, fortunately. After all, the responsibility for the material maintenance of the family lies on the man, not on the woman. Secondly, we are in no hurry to have children. I believe that it is silly to give birth to Beskov without a yard is terribly irresponsible. And thirdly, I'm going through such a period now. Do you think it's easy to work as a waitress on night shifts? To tolerate the antics of customers? I need to recuperate, get back to my old self. Kathy could have said a lot of things to her daughter-in-law, but she kept quiet. She kept quiet for her son's sake. He was having a hard enough time as it was. And now he's going to be caught between his mother and his wife, like between two fires. Kathy was well aware that her daughter-in-law was openly condemning her life. And this Julia to give birth to children without a stake, without a yard is irresponsible. I mean, that's a stone to her head. When did she and Andrew have Alex? The young family didn't have their own place yet. That's what the daughter-in-law was implying. The longer the young lived at Kathy's, the clearer the woman realized Julia manipulates Alex, makes him dance to his own tune, uses the spouse. The son is the one who is in love with the young beauty, put on the other in front of his eyes and left the spouse. Turns this situation in his favor. Julia herself clearly does not nourish a colleague any tender feelings. This is evident from her irritation, her dislike of the other look at the spouse. According to gestures, yes, a lot of them, these indicators, and how only the son does not notice. So why is Julia still with Alex? The answer is simple. Who else would work so hard for her? Where else would she find someone so loyal and obedient? Such a feeling as Alex has for Julia is rare, and the girl understands it perfectly well. She will try to make the most of the situation. And if suddenly there will be a more interesting option, she will easily leave Alex. Being confident in her own power, Julia behaved rudely with her mother-in-law right in front of Alex. The daughter-in-law must have realized that Kathy could see right through her. It was infuriatingly annoying and frightening, apparently. And how did Julia look at her mother-in-law? She felt superfluous in her own house, arrogant, full of contempt. Looks, shelves, remarks, reproaches. To have less contact with her daughter-in-law. Kathy now went to visit her neighbor herself. She also often traveled to her sister's house and even stayed overnight. Christina, of course, advised to put the initial Julia in her place. "It's your house after all," shook her sister's head. Remind her of that. Let them think about it now. Tell them you were separating. You were looking for a place to live. Otherwise, she's living on her own, and she's got a lot of nerve. I'll talk to her myself, if you're uncomfortable. No. Kathy waved his hands. No way. Alex is always on her side. It's hard enough for him. He didn't need to add to his frustration. Alex really did blindly believe everything his wife said. Kathy tried to be as polite as possible. I kept silent in response to her nibs, remarks. My sister-in-law uncomplainingly cleaned her plates, tolerated her reproaches. But Julia, apparently, still complained to her husband about his mother, put in an unsightly light. "Mom, why are you picking on her?" Sometimes the son would start a conversation. "Julia is a wonderful woman. I love her. You mustn't think of her as an enemy. Try to make up with her." "I didn't have a fight with her," Kathy tried to justify it. "I'm trying not to talk to her at all. Any conversation turns in her direction, and she makes me her number one enemy. That's what it's all about." Alex shook his head sadly. "Julia says so you despise her, or do not notice, or come to reproach. The third is not given. Why do you make her work in the kitchen? Julia was going through a rough patch. She needed a vacation. So I just reminded her to clean up her plate. No one's making her work. I serve you myself." Alex looked at his mother with a sad look, and Kathy realized that everything is useless. He still will not believe that his wonderful Julia systematically turns the life of her husband and mother-in-law into a nightmare. Maybe he'll get to Alex someday, but not now. Julia masterfully turned Alex against his own mother, against the person who sheltered the couple in her house, gave them shelter, who, in fact, feeds them. Since Alex earns pennies at the sawmill, and the lion's share of his salary goes to pay off loans. In the city, the couple had managed to rack up loans that they now had to pay off. It was frustrating and painful. Kathy saw no way out of the situation. She only hoped that Alex would sooner or later see the light. Sometimes she wanted to kick the insolent youth out of the house, but that would mean losing her son forever. Julia manages to turn Alex against his mother on the spot. And here, if she throws them out of the house at a difficult moment. There's a lot of drama to be had here. Shakespeare would be jealous. And this house, to be honest, belonged to Alex when her mother died. Kathy suddenly realized that such things usually happen suddenly. Yes, Mom was sick. She needed help, but there was no sign of her leaving so soon. Kathy thought about it a lot, because she might one day be gone just as suddenly. And then how would Alex be left with? The inheritance was 6 months away. Suddenly, some other claimants for this house will show up unexpectedly and heirs. My father had a complicated relationship with his relatives. Anything's possible. To protect Alex, Kathy, who was at that time the only owner of the house, wrote a gift deed to her son, and that was it. Her soul was at peace. Kathy was used to living for her only child. She did everything for him. Now the house officially belonged to Alex. And the son knew it was true. At the time, Alex thought he wouldn't need the inheritance. He planned to settle down in the city, buy a nice apartment, that he's some country house. Who knew it would turn out like this? Kathy decided to be patient. It cost her a lot of strength to keep her temper in check and not take it out on Julia. And it wasn't good for her health either. But for the sake of her son, she could bear it as long as Alex was happy. If not for Christina and her sensible advice, Kathy would have spent all her savings on an apartment in the city for young people. But her sister was right. The woman understood that now more than ever. Julia doesn't like Alex. It's obvious. She's using him. If Alex buys an apartment, which will be considered jointly acquired property, the young spouse will immediately demand a divorce, and she will legally take half of the housing with her into her new life. And this is very good money. Well, no, we'll not wait, Julianka. Alex won't be blinded by this strange love for ages. Someday he'll see the light. That's when he'll need an apartment in the city for his new life. Too bad he can't get out of the house for free. Kathy had to put up with the antics and unfair reproaches of his sister-in-law. There was no end to it, but the woman understood. Now she's in no position to change anything. Christina, seeing that her sister was having a hard time, suggested we go on vacation together. Why don't we dispel all Kathy's phone calls and go sunbathing? We'll swim in the sea. We'll go on excursions. It'll be great. Go for it. In the end, Kathy gave in. She really needed a break from everything that was going on at home. Young people, let them live in the village house. Julia would have to cook and clean. They've spoiled her. Doesn't even help with the plate. She sits at home all day and the phone hangs out and watches soap operas. Julia, of course, expressed her opinion about Kathy's vacation. There is no money in the family, and some people go to resorts. She replied, somehow to Alexa's remark that his salary has been cut again. But here even the man who had angelic patience and in love with his wife could not stand it. Julia, what do you care? Mom earned it. She has the right. What about us? We have never been anywhere with you, and we'll make money. I promise. Kathy hid in her room without saying anything. She didn't have time to get into an argument with her sister-in-law. Things don't pack themselves. It had been a wonderful trip. Kathy and Christina rented a house in a small village by the Black Sea. The sisters walked a lot, swam in the warm waves, sunbathed, went on all sorts of excursions. Kathy once took a risk and realized an old dream, took a ride on a hydrocycle with a young and reckless driver. The spray in the face, the dizzying speed of the endless sea surface. So scary and so much fun. It's never been at the same time. What's their sea and excursions? The sisters even went to discos at night and danced as in their youth. Do not despair. Thank you, Christina, for pulling me out. Sincerely enjoyed, Kathy. I feel like I'm 10 years younger. By the way, that's exactly what it looks like. Christina smiled. You look better, more rested. You look great. And so it was. For the first time in years, Kathy liked herself in the mirror. She had a fresher glow. And most importantly, there was a sparkle in her eyes and life and energy in her face. Kathy felt that she had left behind all the problems and the cranky, demanding daughter-in-law, and the unsettled son, and the endless squabbles in the kitchen. There was a powerful reset. The woman felt strong, beautiful, and energetic. The world seemed bright and welcoming. Only good things were thought of. One day, the sisters came late and admired for a long time unusually large stars and bright yellow moon, which left a clear path on the sea surface. Beauty stretched out Kathy. It certainly was, agreed Christina. It's a shame, only to go back tomorrow. I can't believe it. I love it here so much. Another life, another world. It's back to the same old thing. It's driving them away. Christina couldn't take it anymore. Sitting on your neck and getting hard. She's sad. She'll wait for me. I'll come and clean up your mess. Don't. The Ataman protested. It will make things worse. There's no need to make things worse, grumbled Christina. There's nowhere else to go. Good evening, lovely ladies. A low, pleasant voice came from behind them. Both women shuddered with surprise and turned around. In front of them stood a man, slim, trim, with elegant gray hair on his temples. He was charming and had a very friendly smile. He was wearing jeans that went up to his knees and a loose black t-shirt. In all this, the stranger looked very stylish and attractive. And hello to you too, answered for the two of them Christina. Wonderful evening, isn't it? The man kept approaching. Kathy could not take her eyes off his smile. It made the stranger's face seem to glow. The man introduced himself as William, said he had just arrived here today, and checked into a room on the second floor of his sister's cafe. Just today, they were having dinner in this place, drinking wine, eating kebab, enjoying live music. William immediately noticed two beautiful single ladies at the table and followed them to the shore. I apologize if I startled you. And don't think I'm a frivolous adventurer. It's just that you both have such kind smiles. I just wanted to get to know you better. I'm here all by myself. I'd like to find some company for socializing. If you don't mind. There's a problem with that. It's Christina's fault, she shrugged. I mean, we're leaving on a plane tomorrow at lunch. That's a shame. The smile slipped off William's face for a moment. Kathy was also sorry they wouldn't have the chance to get to know the man better. Surely it would have been even more fun and exciting for the three of them to spend their vacation together. There was something about William, something special. Kathy wanted to be near him, to look into his eyes, to admire the man's smile, to listen to him. Strange, the woman didn't remember anything like that happening to her in the last 30 years. And had it ever happened in her life at all? Well, if that's the case, we have one night left. William was smiling again. So let's make it a fun night to remember. I come here a lot. I'll show you places to see. You're coming with me. Kathy was ready to say yes right away, but Christina's careful. Christina, unlike her sister, didn't lose her head around the charming stranger. It's like we're seeing you for the first time, she smiled embarrassedly. I don't want to offend you, but it's right to slap yourself on the forehead. William. Of course, there are all sorts of lunatics and criminals nowadays. Of course you're wary, and so am I. Let's just walk along the promenade then. There's a lot of people here. I don't want to part with you. That's the way to humor Christina. Kathy realized her sister was pleased that William was not offended. It was a wonderful walk. The sisters and their new acquaintance chatted and laughed without ceasing. Turns out William lives in New York and has his own business there, a chain of restaurants in the States. He's often there on business, meeting with winemakers, making contracts, shopping. Basically, he's growing the business. The man also told about his personal life, sincerely, without any secrets. He acted as if he had known Christina and Kathy for 100 years. William was widowed early. His daughter was only 9 years old at the time, and he never remarried because his daughter didn't want a stepmother living in the house. And the word of an only child was always law to William. You and Kathy are alike in that, Christina remarked. She too lives only with her son, tolerates a lot for his sake, allows him everything. Yes, William looked at Kathy with interest. The woman's eyes met his, and she flashed like a young woman. She even felt hot. That's a shame. Years later, I realized that's not the way to do it. My daughter grew up to be quite a spoiled brat, but she's doing well now. She found a husband who, like me, tolerates her whims and fancies, and lives quietly abroad, unfortunately. They've gone to a warm place, so I'm all alone. I have a job, friends, but still, after my daughter's departure, I feel empty in the house and in my soul. The trio partied until the wee hours of the morning, and it seemed as if they'd gone back to their youth. William clearly sympathized with Kathy. He tried to please her from time to time, taking her hand casually. Once he hugged her waist lightly and briefly. Kathy wanted that moment to last forever. The sisters reached their cottage only when the matchmaking began. William, of course, volunteered to see them off. I don't want to part with you, William confided. His eyes, of course, were on Kathy. Why do you blame the phones? Christina suddenly suggested. Why did we have such a good time? Why don't we come back again next year? We should call each other so we can have a vacation together. It'd be fun. That's obvious. That's a great idea. William says yes. I'm dictating my number. No, you better give me your phone number. Kathy complied with William's request with a smile. He deliberately held her hand in his as he took her cell phone. There was so much warmth from him, so much tenderness. Kathy wanted to dissolve into it all. It was a shame they had met so late. William quickly dialed his number from Kathy's cell phone. But there he smiled. Now we've exchanged phone numbers. We won't lose everything. Great, nodded Kathy. And she knew perfectly well that this phone exchange meant nothing. And the fairy tale that had almost begun would never really begin, because there was no tomorrow. Already today, she and anyone will fly home. And there again a cramped village house, a disgruntled daughter-in-law, a Willa son. And the problems hadn't gone anywhere, while she was away. William, today he's been out with them. Tomorrow he'll find someone else. A man like that, he's not for her. He's too handsome, successful, wonderful. Where would she go with someone like that? Sad, of course, but the truth of life. Ah, how he looked at you, smiled Christina, when the sisters were left alone. I wish someone would look at me with admiration someday. Well, just once. Oh, come on. Kathy waved you off with a smile. She knew that now she would often remember William for his soft voice, his delightful manners, his beautiful eyes. And let that man forget about her the very next day, it didn't matter. William, he played a huge role in her life, although he himself did not even realize it. Kathy did not reach her home until the evening. She and Christina had managed to nap for a couple of hours before the flight, but Kathy still felt tired and broken. Sleepless night, flight, acclimatization. The door was unlocked. Alex must have forgotten to lock the gate when he got home from work. He's been tired lately. And then there was Julia, who knows what she was feeding her husband while she was away. It was hard to imagine a daughter-in-law cooking borscht for her husband. The windows in the house were open wide. The steady hum of the television came from inside. The evening news was on. Kathy was about to enter the house with a smile. When she heard Julia's voice, she was obviously in the kitchen. How? Very simple. I was telling off someone who was obviously Alex. Now will appear soon. We will send her for milk. And while she walks, we'll put her things out of the door. It's no big deal. We've agreed 100 times. What are you worried about? Isn't that too harsh? Asked in an uncertain voice Alex. She's my mother after all. And this is her house. Not hers, yours. Julia argued. You showed me the deed of gift. And if that's the case, why should I put up with her here? I mean, she's been harassing me on and on and on. Alex, I told you, she's trying to break us up. But let me leave then, because I can't live in a house with your mother anyway. Okay, Alex mumbled conciliatingly. As agreed, so we will act. You just look, don't give any slack. We'll do everything right, you know? Standing up for personal boundaries. We're good. Kathy was standing under the window, dead or alive. It slowly dawned on her that she just overheard him talking, and that she was about to be kicked out of the house, and that Alex had agreed to it. There was no way the older woman had expected such a thing. She even had dark flickers in front of her eyes. Her blood pressure must have skyrocketed. Kathy took a few deep breaths to pull herself together, let on a joyful look, and entered the native hay. Oh, hello, lusciously, Julia smiled. And we were waiting for you a little later. A cab was rushing by. I didn't have time to look back, Kathy. I brought you some presents. Oh, what an experience. No sharing. Julia was doing her best to feign some sort of joy at seeing you. Alex stood next to her, slumped and silent. And Kathy perfectly understood the reason for her son's sadness. Of course, it's not easy for him right now. But he can't put his wife in her place. She has too much influence on him. Oh, Kathy splashed Julia's hands. You go to Anna for fresh milk, please. I have soup boiling on the stove. I can't get away. Alex is very tired from work, and I'm sick. If you are not very tired, then of course, nodded Kathy, and left the house, already knowing what awaited her on her return. It was a good thing she had overheard the conversation. She would at least have time to prepare for a serious conversation with her son and his wife. Her suitcases. Kathy spotted the porch from afar. They stood orphaned, leaning against the wall, waiting for their hostess. The hope that Alex would stop his wife's insolent behavior melted like smoke. The woman went up on the porch, knocked on the door. There was a note from inside. Julia's voice sounded. Read it, and you'll understand everything. Goodbye. I don't need it. I need your note, Kathy said. I want to talk to you. I want to look you in the eye. The door swung open with a bang. Julia stood on the threshold. She looked haughtily at Kathy. Well, look, if that's what you want. Julia, why are you doing this to me? I've tried to be your friend. Haven't I? You piss me off. A young woman has split. You're judgmental. Everything's wrong. Everything's wrong. You make your own rules. I don't feel like I own the place. And Alex is fawning over you. Well, this is my home. gently reminded Kathy. That's why it's natural for me to make my own rules. Julia exclaimed again. Again, you insinuate that we live in your house. It's not your house, by the way. It's not yours, it's your son's. So you're the one living here. Then get out of here. You have a good pension, enough to rent. Thank you. You even packed my things, Kathy said calmly. And it took a lot of effort to stay calm, crying. She will when she gets to Christina. Of course, she'll go to her sister's. Who else? Only there aren't many of them here. My stuff is just clothes. What about photo albums? Old books, letters? And this junk is heavy, sighed Christina. We threw it out. Kathy gasped. It was as if she'd been punched in the solar plexus. It was her family's history, old photographs, letters from Andrew and her parents, postcards, diaries Christina and Kathy had kept when they were young. The first drawings by Helen and Alex. All of it carefully stored in boxes and folders, neatly arranged on shelves on a rack and in the bedroom. Really? Was there nothing left? Julia looked at her mother-in-law with defiance. What is this habit of clinging to junk? The insolent girl grinned. What good are these dusty papers? It's even easier to breathe without them. Kathy, despite her condition, suddenly had a great idea. She even had to suppress a smile so as not to accidentally give herself away to Julia. Soon, she would no longer feel like the mistress of the situation. In a couple of minutes, the expression of smugness would evaporate from her pretty face. So you all threw everything out of my room. Totally. It's gonna be our closet now. All the boxes, every single one of them. Did you even look inside? Some of it was looked at, some of it was just thrown away. Why is Julia suddenly tense? Were there documents or what? The documents can be recovered in case of emergency. Kathy sank down tiredly on the porch steps. The blue shoebox was thrown away too. Yeah, probably, but what's the big deal? Kathy looked up at Julia. The blue box was my savings for the apartment I was going to give Alex. The words had an incredible effect. Julia stunned pale. She opened and closed her mouth a couple times to say something, then powerlessly sank down on the steps next to Kathy. Why didn't you warn me? She almost whispered. Kathy was pleased with the effect of the phrase. She didn't keep the money in any blue shoebox. It was lying quietly in her account. But Julia had to teach her a lesson for all those naughty things, which she did to both her and Alex. How did I know you'd decide to throw my stuff out of the house? I had no idea. The older woman stubbornly played the role of a confused and bewildered old lady. Julia shook her head as if she had woken up from a dream. Her eyes lit up with eagerness for action. You will tell me everything in detail now. What the box looked like. What shade of blue, was it big or small? Questions poured out of her sister-in-law like a cornucopia of questions. Kathy answered, trying not to get confused in her statement. The situation was beginning to get her down. Alex had stayed home all this time, never even poked his nose out on the porch. Probably he was ashamed of the fact that he had gone along with his wife and kicked his mother out of the house. But he couldn't go against his wife either. He loved her too much, which Julia took advantage of. After answering all Julia's questions, Kathy walked to the bus stop. Come on, stay, he mumbled to his sister-in-law. She now needed her mother-in-law to help her in her search. The young woman was determined to find the box, even in a landfill, even at the end of the world. And Kathy could help her find it. She knew what a huge amount of money looked like. Why would she? Kathy was a little surprised. What do you mean? Why should we? Now we have to look for the box of money together. You do care about your savings. Is that what it is? Kathy smiled. That's where you're wrong. I don't care what happens to that money. I was going to give it to you anyway. If you find it, take it. Kathy walked down the street and felt Julia's eyes on her. Her sister-in-law was shocked that she had thrown away so much money with her own hands. Yes, but now she'll be digging her nose into the ground just to bring that wealth home. Greedy Julia doesn't realize that Kathy's money is in a bank account. Her mother-in-law is not so dumb as to keep such funds in a box. Before heading to the bus stop, Kathy stopped by Jenna's neighbor's house. She'd been friends with her mother once, good friends. But now she was gone, unfortunately. Kathy still had a good relationship with Jenna. She needed someone in the village, someone who would tell her what was going on, keep an eye on Julia. And Jenna was the perfect informant. The woman had been outraged at first, listening to Kathy's story. She couldn't get her head around it. How could she do such a thing to a man who had let his daughter-in-law and son into the house when they were in a difficult situation? And then, recognizing it all the way through, Jenna laughed loudly and merrily. But Tamar, you guys, you've got to rub her nose in it like that. You figured it out. I'd like to know how they're doing. Kathy smiled. How are they living? How's the search going? Something tells me this story will open Alex's eyes to his wife. Oh, Alex shook her head, Jenna. I didn't think he'd be so weak-willed. Love is evil, Kathy sighed. Jenna had hit a sore spot in her heart. Of course I'll keep an eye on them. I'll get my Petya on board too. You know how quick he is? Peter. Jenna's son just turned 14. The kid's been using his phone to shoot content for his channel. And Peter seemed to be getting good at it. When Kathy was done with her chores, she went to her sisters. Christina would not leave her, would listen to her, support her, pity her. It was good to have such a person. Since the evening of Kathy's return from the resort, it's been 2 weeks. It's not a long time, really. But in that time, a lot had happened. First of all, Kathy's plan had worked. Julia was hooked. She found out where they take the garbage from their village. She found the dump, and now she went there every day as if to work. The girl was not employed anywhere and had plenty of free time, and Julia's trips to the dump were regularly reported to Kathy by phone by Jenna. She proved to be an excellent contact. Oh, Aunt Kathy. What a circus. She goes to the bus stop first thing in the morning. She's like a tourist. She's got a huge rucksack on her shoulders, overalls, gloves, bags. Everything is serious. And in the evening, she comes back tired, shot, angry. She smells like a motherfucker. Animals scatter. People cringe. It's like a circus. Tales of Julia's adventures don't stop there. Peter, Jenna's son, sometimes followed Julia, rode with the boys on bikes to the dump, and filmed videos of the young woman stubbornly digging through mountains of garbage. Kathy watched these videos on Channel 5. Julia scrupulously combed through the dump day after day without missing a square meter. It looked comical, of course. But Kathy was already feeling a little sorry for her almost ex-sister-in-law. Alex had filed for divorce. First, Kathy learned from the neighbors that Alex had left home. Then the son called his mother, apologized himself, repented, and at the same time informed her that he was divorcing Julia. She had turned her back after all, and him away with her obsession, money, boorishness, greed. We're getting a divorce, Mom, I can't stand her anymore. She must be crazy. Julia, let her stay at our house for a while. I gave her a week because she has nowhere to go. Julia keeps hoping to find money. It's become an obsession for her. She blames herself for not looking in the boxes I threw out. Eating on her own. She blames me too. It's unbearable. What are you going to do in the city? I finally found a good job with a place to live, which is important. But I'll have to travel a lot. But I don't care. But the money's good. After talking to my son, Kathy felt better. It is so important to be in touch with a loved one. Now between her and Alex, there are no conflicts and misunderstandings. And Alex's life seems to be getting better. He found a job from Julia, who used him openly, and is leaving. Maybe soon he will meet a good girl and will be happy in his personal life again. What are his years? Relationship with Julia will obviously be a good lesson for Alex. He won't fall into such a net again. At least Kathy really hoped so. The nicest thing happened in Kathy's life the day after she arrived at her sister's house. Christina, of course, had taken her in. They had a spare room in their apartment. Live as long as you like, Sis hugged Kathy. I'd be happy to move in forever. Kathy went to bed all upset. She still had no idea how she was going to live her life. In the morning, she got a call from William. The same casual acquaintance, so enchanted that the woman at the resort. He said that he couldn't forget their meeting, that he thought of Kathy all the time. Dreams of seeing her again. It was incredible. William. Kathy had never imagined that such a man would actually fall in love with her. But it seems that he did. William called and wrote often. They talked a lot, and gradually they became close, like relatives. Distant, yes. But still Kathy felt that this communication was necessary for both of them. William expressed a desire to come to Kathy, but she suggested another option more pleasant. Kathy would fly to him herself, because the atmosphere of a resort and a lush old country town are, as they say, two big differences. Kathy had the money for the trip that she had saved for her son's apartment. Alex, he earns his own money. Kathy has only one life, and one should enjoy every moment of it. The woman realized this when she retired, but better late than never. In general, Kathy was going on a long journey, went shopping with anyone, bought beautiful things, and felt really happy. True, she had one more thing to do before she left, not very pleasant, but urgent. A conversation with Julia. She'd had enough of being queen of the dump. Let her start a new life too.